Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the ZeroG draft strategy. And in this podcast, I'm going to break down exactly how you should be drafting the goalie position in your leagues this year. Let's get it. All right, welcome in. Solo episode for me here today. Just going to be a little bit of a shorter one, but I wanted to get back into some ZeroG talk. I know everybody wants to hear these at the start of every year. I'll go through my goalie tiers in here as well, just kind of give the people my thoughts on the goalie position for this year. Without any further ado, we will get into it. Before I get into the main content here, though, I just want to plug Drafters Fantasy. Again, I've been having a blast drafting over there. They have an $11 entry NHL Best Ball Tournament going right now, $50,000 in prizes. You can use the promo code GINOS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. That's GINOS for the audio listeners. Yeah, I've been having so much fun drafting over there. Definitely a good time to get in there and scratch that draft itch if you got some extra cash laying around burning a hole in your pocket. Enough of that, though. You're here for the goalie talk. You're here for the ZeroG talk if you're coming to Apples and Ginos. And so I figured I'd start off here with a little bit of a ZeroG refresher, if you will. Basically, what we're trying to do with ZeroG, we're trying to spend less draft capital on goalies than our league mates. You can kind of think about this. I've mentioned this before, but you can kind of think of each draft pick as having some sort of dollar value. Obviously, the later picks have less of a dollar value. Your very first round pick has the most dollar value, and then you just kind of think about it in that vein, and then you can think to yourself, okay, I want to spend less dollars here than anybody in my league, ideally. And the reason that we do that is because we believe that goalies are more replaceable than any other position in fantasy hockey. You're much more likely to get comparable production off the waiver wire. We talk about this every year. I go through the list of all the goalies who were big hits from later in the drafts. Last year, depending on your source, Sergei Bobrovsky came from later rounds. Jordan Binnington certainly did. And then throughout the year, you had huge stretches from Charlie Lindgren, Cam Talbot, Connor Ingram, Joey Decord. Even Petr Mrazek was actually pretty good when you summed it all up at the end of the year if you were just looking for volume. And so there are just a lot of these goaltenders that emerge over the course of the year. Somebody is going to hit on these waiver wire goalies. And if you take a goalie early, you're basically already losing a little bit to whoever it is in your league that hits on these waiver wire goalies. So make that person yourself, basically. Position yourself to be the person who hits on the goalie late, not the one who invests a ton of capital up front. You should always be interested in adding the hottest new goalie on the waiver wire. Sometimes if you draft goalies earlier, then you're just not even interested and you end up passing up on a player, a goaltender that would actually make your team better and would have even been better than the goaltender that you drafted earlier on. That's definitely a possibility as well. I really think that we need to get away from just thinking about, okay, I got to find my goalie and I got to just hang on to him for the whole year. I don't think that's the right way to think about goalies in general. Goalies go hot and cold throughout the year, even the very best ones. We saw it last year with guys like Shesterkin, Ottinger, Vasilevsky, all the guys that were being drafted highly. A lot of them had ups and downs their season, Saros as well. So I tend to think about goalies as 2 to 4 week propositions rather than season long holds, no matter what, and expect them to just have that kind of ebb and flow throughout the season. This also helps you, going this route also helps you to avoid take lock on goalies and hanging on to goalies that are actually kind of actively hurting you. You really don't want to get into that position where you drafted the guy and you're like, man, I drafted so much, I spent so much draft capital on this goaltender, I don't feel like I can drop him. We really want to avoid that. And going ZeroG helps you to not have that take lock. You can be like, oh yeah, I picked up Connor Ingram, he's been great, but now he's sucking again. He's kind of turning back into a pumpkin here, I'm okay to drop him and go on to the next thing. So that's another thing that ZeroG can help you out with. And obviously, what we're trying to do, if we are pushing the goaltenders to later in our drafts, we're trying to build the best skater group in the league. I think about where Philip Forsberg and Sam Reinhart were drafted in a lot of drafts last year, and that's just one more shot. If you're not drafting a goalie in those kind of middle to later rounds where guys like Forsberg and Reinhart typically emerge from, we knew that Forsberg and Reinhart were good players, but we didn't know they'd be that good, obviously, or we would have drafted them much higher. But going ZeroG allows you to just take more shots at finding those huge breakouts among the skaters. And you still can find pretty huge breakouts among goaltenders on the waiver wire. And so it really does feel like you're not giving up a whole lot to be more into taking those shots in your draft on skaters and really trying to build the best skater group in the league right from day one, dominate up front, and then put together your goaltenders throughout the year. The other thing that people often say, I've had discussions and lots of people have commented on different aspects of ZeroG and parts they like and don't like, and that's fine. I've always welcomed the discussion. I think it is always interesting, and I'm not saying I have a perfect corner on the truth, although obviously I've titled this video, this podcast, The Correct Way to Draft Goalies, so obviously that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but people often say that I'm spending way too many ads on goaltenders, and honestly, I would argue that I'm not. I would argue that a lot of people are actually spending way too few ads on goaltenders, and they're actually letting goaltenders be bad on their teams far too often. I think I'm just the way I perceive it anyway, and you can take this for what it's worth, I think I'm more realistic about how quickly goalie performance changes, and I would rather be moving on when the goaltenders are not performing. So that's the way that I approach it. I've had some good results myself, but obviously everybody's free to do what they want to do with their own. I really do think that you want to be piecing together goaltender production in this way. If you go by Cupful ADP last year, only 3 of the top 10 goaltenders had a save percentage of 9-10 or better. And so if I can spend an average of 1 ad every 2 to 3 weeks on goaltenders who are getting volume, and if they give me a 905 save percentage or better, then basically it feels like I'm keeping pace with the league at that point, with all the people who spent the top 10 pick on a goaltender, or picked one of the top 10 goaltenders, I should say, wherever they were ranked in ADP. So if I can do that, then that feels like really good use of my ads. I went through all my teams. I didn't end up using that many ads on goaltenders. I didn't have to spend as many ads as people think. Like, people think I'm spending 2 or 3 ads every week on goaltenders, just trying to piece together goaltenders all the time. That's really not the case. I have a heuristic that I use in season that's served me pretty well. I'm really just looking for goaltenders that are projected to get a couple of starts in the next week. And then out of the list of all the goaltenders that might be available that I think will get 2 starts next week, I kind of rank them by their potential matchups, how they're playing. Obviously, the team in front of them is a big consideration for me, because I do think that a lot of goaltender play is correlated very directly to how the team is playing. And then I pick my goaltenders that way. It's served me really well. I've found a lot of these ZeroG diamonds in the rough, if you will, on the waiver wire using that heuristic. And so if I can do that, and I can do that consistently, and I'm not, spending a ridiculous amount of ads every week, realistically, I'm spending maybe 1 ad a week on a goaltender in a lot of cases, and in a lot of cases even less than that. That is really not that bad, in my opinion. And in fact, I'd argue that's probably somewhere around optimal if you're not tolerating bad goaltender production on your team. So that's my case there. You can take that for what it's worth. And then for that reason, because I'm thinking about goaltenders as, 2 to 4 week propositions, and not really trying to nail down somebody that I can just hold forever, that's not really the way that I ever think about goaltenders. The end of season results are just not as interesting to me as finding goaltenders who are getting hot at the right time. Lindgren was the prime example last year, right? If you got Lindgren going into your fantasy playoffs, he played like every game for the Capitals. He was a huge volume monster and had great results. That was the guy to own going into the playoffs last year. But if you look at the end of season results, obviously he didn't play the whole season, so it might not look like he had as great a season as he did. But realistically, he was probably on a lot more championship winning teams than some of the much higher drafted and higher total points scored goaltenders that you might have out there. If you want more info about ZeroG, I've done plenty of articles, plenty of podcasts on this topic. The most recent one was episode 307. So you can go back and check that out if you want to, just check out more perspective on ZeroG that I've provided in the past. I answered some frequently asked questions in that episode as well. So there's definitely more in that one there. All right. Before I get into what I would call my practical approach to drafting goaltenders in 2024-25, I just want to mention the Apples and Genos Patreon. $2 a month gets you the supporter tier, access to patron-only live shows. If you join right now, you can get access to the total draft strategy episode that I did for the patrons. You can get that through Patreon. It was recorded and posted there. So if you want to check that out, I tried to cover as much draft strategy as I possibly could, all different aspects. $2 a month gets you access to that. And obviously, if you stay on, then you'll get access to each of the monthly patron-only live shows as they come out throughout the season. $8 a month tier, you get the patron-only live shows. You also get access to patron-only Discord channels. We have now filled all the listener leagues, so you're not going to get in there anymore, but you will get my show notes for each and every show. This is especially something that people look for in season when they get my show notes, including the weekly waiver wire ad targets. You're also this year going to get some special tools that I've developed to be able to evaluate players in season, compare players, what have you there. If you're a true fantasy degenerate, $15 a month gets you all the above perks, but also I'll personally answer every single one of your questions, guaranteed. Let's get into some goaltenders. How to draft goaltenders, the practical approach to drafting goalies in 2024-25. First off, I'm really not in the business of trying to predict goaltenders. I'm much more interested in team situations. I'm trying to make as little declaration about goaltender talent as I possibly can. It does seem like over the past number of years, people have really been out on the talent of certain players, but they've been able to outperform that based on their situation in a number of cases. And so I am oftentimes more interested in a team situation than some public perception of the individual goaltender's talent. There are exceptions to every rule, but as a general rule of thumb, I would say that. And then I obviously tried to apply tiered drafting. And so that's what I'm going to take you through now, my tiers for goaltenders this year and how I'm kind of approaching the position. So first off, tier 1, this is a tier that I'm just never going to draft because they're always going to go much higher than I'm willing to pick them up. I have Shesterkin, Hellebuck, Saros, Ottinger, Bobrovsky, and Vasilevsky in that order in this tier. I feel reasonably confident that at least one of these guys is probably going to bust, and one of these guys is going to be the number one goaltender on the season. If you feel really confident in picking out which one of these goaltenders is going to be that number one, last year Hellebuck was at the bottom of tier 1 for a lot of people, and he emerged as the clear-cut best goaltender in all of the NHL. So if you think you can pull that rabbit out of a hat once again this year, then be my guest. But yeah, I'm just not going to be drafting from this tier. They're almost always going to go far above where I'd be willing to reach for one. Tier 2, I would call this the only if they fall tier. And here I have Jeremy Swayman, Stuart Skinner, and Ilya Sorokin. Interesting tier. Skinner is in a really good spot, obviously, in Edmonton, but the defense has been a little bit decimated. They might try to outscore their opponents a little bit more than play really good defense. And so that could be a little bit concerning. Jeremy Swayman is not reporting to camp. That's a concern. I mean, hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, that we'll have some news and they're progressing towards getting something done there. But yeah, that's obviously concerning. And if it continues to linger throughout training camp, then he would continue to fall down my tiers. But as of this recording, that's where I have him. Ilya Sorokin has also had, some qualms coming out. He had some back surgery, I guess, this offseason. It sounds like that was part of the reason he was not played as much at the end of last season, where Varlamov was getting a lot of runs. So that could be an interesting piece of that puzzle. But it sounds like Sorokin's been golfing this offseason already, and it doesn't sound to me like he's going to miss significant time, if any. So I don't think you have to be too worried about that. But obviously, we should get more news as training camp progresses here. But I think he fits within this tier still. Tier 3, might get one here. So here I have Georgiev, Markstrom, Thatcher Demko, and Linus Allmark. These all have some warts for me. I think Georgiev, if I am going to guess on talent, I don't think he's the most talented player in this group, but he plays for Colorado, which is obviously very exciting. We'll get to it later, but I think he could get pushed for starts this year, and I think the Avs would welcome that. Markstrom, new place, so that's always a little bit scary, a player going to a new team. He has definitely been up and down throughout his career, but has some high-end potential, so definitely makes sense in this tier. Big time question mark there, but also big time potential. Thatcher Demko sounds like he's got an injury at the time of this recording. It just came out that he's going to like address the media, so maybe by the time that you're listening or watching this, there's more news about him, and I might move him a little bit based on that news, if he's gonna miss time or if he's going to proceed with some sort of like load management. There's a lot of scenarios here, but yeah, Thatcher Demko, fully healthy Thatcher Demko would be in tier 1, but this is where I have him based on all the injury speculation that's going on at the moment, and hopefully we get a little bit more clarity about that. Hopefully you already have that by the time that you're listening to this or watching this. Linus Allmark here, just because I think he's going to get a ton of volume in Ottawa. I don't think that the players behind there, Anton Forsberg being the primary backup, will get a lot of run. I think they're actually going to lean on Allmark a lot. They went out and acquired him, spent a good amount to get him on the team. And so hopefully Ottawa takes a step defensively this year, and hopefully Allmark gets a lot of volume, and he fits in here as a result. Tier 4, this is where ZeroG really starts, in my opinion. You've got Aiden Hill here, you've got Darcy Kemper, Jordan Binnington, Joseph Woll, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. I think each of these guys have upside cases. Aiden Hill could be really good if he gets a little bit more volume in Vegas than he's seen before, which is definitely a possibility with Logan Thompson out of town and Ilya Samsonov in town. Samsonov has been very up and down over the last year, so could definitely be a situation where Hill actually ends up getting a fair bit of volume this year. Darcy Kemper, a good situation in LA, maybe not as good as in years past. They've lost some defenders there in LA, but a good system nonetheless that should be beneficial to a solid goaltender like Kemper. Jordan Binnington had a great year last year. I don't know if I can really bank on that for this year. St. Louis could blow up and be terrible this year. That's definitely within the cards as well. Joseph Woll, great opportunity in Toronto. I do think he's the 1A there to start. The management has repeatedly talked about how much they love Joseph Woll. They think he can be that guy for them, but they did go out and add Anthony Stolarz this offseason, so it wasn't like they're ready to hand Joseph Woll 60+% of starts. I think that this is going to be definitely a 1A, 1B situation, but Woll would be the guy to target there. And obviously, Toronto going to be a very good place to accrue a lot of wins and be a favorable defensive environment, hopefully, this year with the additions of Tanev and OEL on the back end. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I'm struggling to really decide where to go with Luukkonen. They have Devin Levi in the wings. Luukkonen had a great year last year, really emerged throughout the year. They gave him a solid contract this offseason, which tells me he's going to get a fair amount of run this year as they kind of ease Levi into the NHL. Probably a little bit more than they were able to last year is what they'd like to do. And so I think he makes some sense here. I'm just not sure if I totally believe it yet with UPL and with Levi in the wings, who has been terrific at the AHL level. You have to wonder if Luukkonen holds on to that job, holds on to at least an 1A role all season long. So that's why I have him in this group and not any higher. Tier 5, lots of upside in this group, but definitely big time question marks for all these players. Philip Gustafsson, I think, probably gets the majority of starts in Minnesota. Marc-Andre Fleury is there, but He has seemingly declined the last couple of years, and I don't know that he's going to challenge a lot. Jesper Wallstedt also waiting in the wings there. He could be a bigger threat, actually, to Gustafsson this year, potentially. Gustafsson did start to play better the last few games of the season last year, so I'm not ruling him out. Minnesota should be a solid environment for goaltender again. Tristan Jarry, I think, probably has a rebound year in him this year. I think Pittsburgh should be a little bit better defensively. Last year just seemed like everything went wrong for the team across the board. I think maybe a minor bounce back, maybe not even to playoff level contention for Pittsburgh, but Yari should get a lot of starts. They're into him for a lot of money and some terms, so they want him to be the starter there, I think. So I'm okay with Tristan Jarry coming in this tier. Connor Ingram, who I think should be at the very least a 1A, potentially more in Utah. I think Utah got a lot better this offseason, should take a step as a team this year, so Ingram makes sense there. I've got Arturs Shilovs in here. Basically because of the Demko uncertainty. If we get news that Demko is going to be out for a long time, or if there's any more negative news on Demko, then Shilovs would rise even more, because Vancouver is a really, really good environment for a goaltender, pretty obviously. Tier 6, these are shots you can take. I've got two tandems in here, Frederick Anderson, Pyotr Kochetkov from Carolina, and then I've got Charlie Lindgren, Logan Thompson from Washington, kind of in here back to back. I don't have strong takes about who might take the net in either spot. Most likely it's a 1A, 1A scenario where they both basically just go completely 50-50, and that's hard to stomach sometimes in leagues where you're rewarded for volume. If you're in a league that rewards more just the rate stats, then obviously they're more attractive in a setup like that. Then I also have Joey Decord, who I think unseats Philip Grubauer as at least a 1A this year. Grubauer's just been quite terrible for a number of years at this point. People say, yeah, but what about the contract? I think the contract, the team has moved on. It's a new coach. Like, everything's changing in Seattle, and I don't think they have as much allegiance to Grubauer as people might think. So I think Decord is probably the better goaltender at this point, and so I'll rank him up here with the prognosis that he's more likely to be the 1A on the season. Petr Mrazek, obviously Chicago, not going to be terrific, but should be better than last year. And Mrazek actually had a pretty low-key solid season last year, so he makes sense here alongside Dustin Wolf. Highly touted AHL goalie of the year, has been amazing in the AHL for the last 2 years, but in a really tough spot in Calgary where they really don't have anyone on the blue line beyond Weegar and Anderson. And so that's going to be a tough spot for a rookie goaltender to come in, but if he's up to it, he could get a lot of volume there and just be valuable from that standpoint. And so I don't think you should be ignoring Dustin Wolf either. Tier 7, I would call this the worth watching tier. Probably not drafting any of these players in your draft, but definitely players you want to keep an eye on in case they get hot or take over for a player ahead of them. Anthony Stolarz, obviously Toronto, great spot to be. So if he's able to wrest away the 1A role, or if Woll goes down to injury, then Stolarz would get a tremendous boost in terms of his fantasy value. Samuel Montembeault should be the starter again in Montreal, or get at least the majority of starts there. If Montreal takes a step, as some are projecting, then he could be valuable. Lucas Dostal, I think, has overtaken John Gibson in the Anaheim net. I don't think John Gibson is the goaltender that a lot of people think he is. He's been in decline for a number of years now, and I don't think that he's better than Dostal at this point, who's an ascending talent and a highly regarded prospect in his own right. Cam Talbot, I think he's going to get most of the run in Detroit, but Detroit has just an embarrassment of embarrassing goaltenders is what I'd call it on their roster. So your guess is as good as mine who is going to get net share in Detroit. I'm guessing it's Talbot, but I'm not tied to that by any stretch. Mackenzie Blackwood, who I do still anticipate will get a 1A role in San Jose with the youngster Yaroslav Askarov coming over in the trade, will get significant but probably 1B type of starts in San Jose. Obviously, San Jose, not a great spot though, so definitely down the list here. Samuel Urson and Ivan Fedotov here from Philadelphia. Probably not going to be a great spot for a goaltender, but both have potential. If one or the other can have a great season, definitely we could see them become really strong ZeroG candidates throughout the year. Then Ilya Samsonov, if he's able to play himself into a timeshare, or if Aiden Hill gets injured yet again, and Samsonov playing for Vegas, that'd be a good spot. And tier 8, these are more just the FYIs. Justus Annunen tops this tier for me. I really like Annunen. Had a terrific run with Colorado, admittedly against some more, let's say, some less worthy opponents that Colorado trotted him out against last year, but he absolutely aced that test and should get more run in Colorado this year. And it wouldn't surprise me if he takes away the top role from Georgiev, who only has this year remaining on his contract. So it could be a situation where Annunen by midseason has taken over the net in Colorado, and then he's one of the most valuable goalies in the league, for fantasy at least. Daniil Tarasov, Elvis Merzlikins. Obviously, nobody's excited about the Blue Jackets this year. I think Tarasov has eclipsed Merzlikins at this point, so I've got him just ahead, but probably going to be a tandem. Probably not going to be a lot of fantasy relevance here. You've got Jonas Korpisalo, who, if the Swayman refusal to sign a contract, whatever you want to call that. If that continues and lingers, then Korpisalo would be in line to get a lot more starts for Boston. So obviously he'd go skyrocketing up this list. John Gibson here, who I'm not excited about. Philip Grubauer, I'm not excited about. Semyon Varlamov, who I anticipate will kind of resume a bit more of a 1B to a backup type role behind Sorokin this year. Maybe they use him a little bit more with Sorokin recovering from the back surgery, but either way, I'm not excited about Varlamov in what should be a 40% or less start share situation. Nedeljkovic, who outplayed Jarry for a good portion of last year, definitely don't discount that he could do so again. Alex Lyon, who's arguably Detroit's best goaltender last year, maybe he's able to reclaim some of that magic again. Joel Hofer was actually pretty terrific for St. Louis last year in a backup role. It's just that Bennington was pretty good as well. Otherwise, Hofer probably would have played himself into even more starts. So I'm keeping an eye on him there. Laurent Brossoit, the backup in Chicago. If Mrazek can't replicate last year's magic, then Brossoit could get some more run. Marc-Andre Fleury, just out of respect for the legend that he is, got him in here. And then Devin Levi as the potential heir apparent in Buffalo, even though they just gave UPL a bigger contract. That's my top 50 goaltenders on the year. Players that are worth watching, and probably, honestly, there will be ZeroG candidates that emerge throughout the year that didn't even make this top 50 list at the start of the season. That is the game we play. That is why we go ZeroG. We will find these people. We'll be calling them out here on the podcast, so stay tuned, and we'll make sure that you're picking up all the hottest ZeroG goaltenders throughout your year, and you're riding them to fantasy success. While you're here, make sure you check out the Apples and Genos Fantasy Guide. If you got a draft upcoming, it's the best way to give yourself that foundation for that draft. Head over to the Patreon, go to shop. It's right there, Canadian $7.99, well worth the price according to the literal hundreds of people who have purchased it so far. Join the Discord community, link in the description below. Like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever you're able to do. It does really help us out here. So please, if you could, that would mean a lot to each of us here. But that's going to be all that we've got for this episode. Hopefully it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. Many thanks to the band They're There for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.